Let's get right to our panelists. Gabriel Snyder, the editor-in-chief of the New Republic, and Elliot Pierce, the chief product officer. Let's start with Elliot and describe what a chief product officer does. What is a CPO?
That's a great question.
This is a way of introducing yourself to everybody.
So thank you all for having us here. Thanks, Max, and thanks, Brian, for moderating. It seems like so a chief product officer currently at the New Republic, I'm in charge of all of our digital products, apps, website, et cetera. And that involves managing a team of software engineers, a couple of product folks in charge of web analytics. And really, it's a blend of strategy and execution of trying to build products that engage readers, delight advertisers, and sort of broker the two.
And what brought you to this?
I've been working in the online news space for a long time. Last year, I worked at Bloomberg Politics, where I got to know Gabriel and helped launch Bloomberg Politics and their new TV show, With All Due Respect. We overlapped at the Times for a while, where I think I was like the first product manager at the New York Times when they introduced them. The product manager role sort of came out of Yahoo in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they had these people who would sit in between classic editorial and sales and work with engineers and marketers to develop products for users. And so I've sort of been riding this wave for the last 15 years or so, and there's a need for it in terms of trying to gather requirements, set a vision, and execute upon that.
And Gabriel, what brought you to the New Republic?
Well, I came to the New Republic. I'm a longtime reader, admirer of the New Republic, and it was just a massive opportunity. Right now, we're at a moment when brands with 100-year histories like the New Republic are facing this new media environment. And my job is probably a little bit easier to explain than Elliot's. I oversee a familiar staff of editors and writers and designers. But I think what's changed is that rather than focusing on a print product, we're looking at an entire array of media platforms that we reach. And I think right now, while we still produce a monthly print magazine, our focus is much more on digital. And increasingly, that digital focus is not just our website. We're thinking about our social platforms and really thinking about how do we find those audiences. So the job is pretty simple, but it's changed dramatically.
Was this the first job you had that involved a print magazine or a print product at all?
It's funny. I started my career in print. My first job was at the New York Observer, a great weekly paper. And then along the way, like many people, I kind of went into all digital jobs.
Yeah, by the time I knew you, I think you were all digital.
Yeah. And so I was worked at Gawker. I've worked for the Atlantic's online division. I worked with Elliot at Bloomberg, which is, well, I guess it does have a print publication. But yes, I felt like I was firmly in the world of pixels and bytes. But so it kind of surprised me to find going over cover proofs and dealing with printing presses.
But did you feel like you're a print magazine editor?
Of course. I mean, we take a lot of pride in all of our platforms.
Yeah.
I think the real challenge and really the accomplishment of this year, though, has been building an editorial team that can perform well on all of these different ones. So we no longer have a print team that makes a magazine and then a web team that creates the website. Our team is really multidisciplinary, and so I have them really thinking about great stories, and then where those stories actually appear can be sort of after the fact.
Some people thought you were crazy when you took over because it seemed like the house was burning down. Lots of people were leaving the New Republic after owner Chris Hughes took over, purchased the magazine. So how have you either stopped the fire or rebuilt the house? What's that process been like to reestablish people's excitement and trust and confidence in the publication?
Well, I think we've had an amazing year in terms of building a new staff. I don't know the exact number, but that's been one of the large focuses. I think we've hired about 20 people on the
Yeah.
editorial side.
So the advantage of that burning process was that you got to bring in new people, a lot of new hires. You got to do a lot of interviewing,
a lot of new faces,
a lot of recruitment.
Yeah, and I think right now that and that happens whenever editorial editors change, and we've got this great team of people who, kind of have this background in editorial, but are not defined by their format. So, I've hired a lot of people who are equally comfortable writing long form as they are, making GIFs or cutting audio for podcasts.
Sorry, is it GIFs or GIFs?
I'm a GIFs man. I'm sorry, I don't want to start a war here. But,
it startled me when you said GIFs, but I'll go with it. I'll allow it.
Peace in our time.
Okay, I'll allow it. One more question for you, and then let's get over to the product side as well. When you're looking for new hires, what kind of people are you looking for? You mentioned people that have to be comfortable doing both. What are the other qualities you're looking for?
I think we've got all sorts of different people on our team, and I think every job has a certain description, and immediately when I am interviewing people or looking over resumes, I'm looking for people who can do that job, have shown that they have, if I'm looking for someone to write daily, commentary, they've done something like that in their career. But really what, kind of pushes people over the top is always having that extra thing. The writer who we hired to do to run our social media, she has a broadcasting background, and she's now producing our first podcast and overseeing that. And I think that for our brand and our company right now, which is in a lot of places where we don't exactly know what we're going to be publishing in 5 or 10 years. I think
Don't know what you're going to be publishing or where you're going to be publishing it.
What
formats?
Yeah, and I think, and not only do we not know, that isn't just because we're not terribly sure about where our opportunities are. We also don't know what the platforms are going to be. Right. There will be a new Snapchat to emerge in 5-10 years. And so one of the things that I think is most important, independent of specific skills, is versatility and an ability to really be curious and to learn. And so we have a lot of people that are able to pick stuff up very quickly, and that itself has become a really important trait.
Adaptability.
Yeah.
Is that true for you as well, Elliot?
Yeah, I think it is. Certainly we had a very small, dedicated engineering staff when I showed up at the New Republic in March, and building up and making a commitment to developing an in-house staff and to both in support of editorial and support of our advertising initiatives was a big strategic zag for the company, and one of the reasons they brought me on board. I think the people, hiring for a place like the New Republic when you're looking for engineers or designers or product managers, those people are in high demand in New York and in the New York City market, and you needed to sort of sell the New Republic in the right way to them, and so selling them on sort of the ability to both produce editorial stories or help in that, to build platforms, and to be sort of people who were excited by some of the turmoil earlier, over the course of the was pivotal in getting the right type of employee who would thrive there, because they could have gone to large companies, they could have gone to other companies, but finding people who sort of thrived in that environment was very helpful.
We're going to talk about a lot of politics, talk about the election tonight, but let me dig a little bit deeper on what you all were saying about adaptability and about not knowing what formats you'll be producing in the future. It's harder and harder and harder to get you to come to his website or to come to my website, CNN. It's easier and easier to reach you on Facebook or on Snapchat or on Google or on Twitter. So increasingly we're putting articles there, we're putting videos there, we're begging for your attention on these social networking sites. But there's a trade-off that comes with that, and there's a fear that we are losing power and that Facebook and Twitter and Google are gaining power. So where does the New Republic stand on this? If I'm setting that up correctly, where do you stand on this?
Well, from an editorial perspective, we just want to be read. And so
even if you have to put your articles all the way entirely on Facebook, and print the whole story on Facebook.
I think the fear, and it's a very real fear of giving over that control, is largely on the business model. And I think as long as publishers are primarily making money from selling impressions of banner ads on their, or display advertising on their websites, then yes, giving your stories away on a platform that you don't necessarily control can be very, very frightening. But from a larger branding perspective, we're in a position where the New Republic, the number of people that know the New Republic is very small in the big media sphere.
Right.
And I think the opportunity to introduce the work that we do to the audience that we're going after is vast.
That's what your publisher, Chris Hughes, said when he bought the magazine. We have to expand the audience. We can grow this in a big way.
Absolutely. And so I think going to that audience is, it's the only way. I don't know anyone who is, building a strategy that is any kind of strategy that involves a large audience that is predicated on people coming to you.
No longer can we just open up a storefront and wait for the customers to walk in. It just doesn't work.
And you're seeing this, not just in publishing, you're seeing this now in even your business and television, where, the app strategy of, watching my favorite, I love Fargo right now on FX, and I probably watch half the episodes on TV and the other half on their app. And so I think that's the direction of the culture. The opportunity for a place like the New Republic, and this kind of steps outside of our department from a business standpoint, is that we're building a creative services agency basically within the business.
Yeah, let's define some terms. What is a creative services agency? Because I actually don't know, and I'm supposed to cover this.
Well, we need Kayvon here. Who can
I can try.
Try for us.
Ultimately. When Guy Vidra was brought in as CEO, there was another big zag, was away from paywalls, right? So we took down a paywall. We're not as focused on an iPad app, which was definitely the focus of sort of the first chapter of
Because
Chris
5 years
Hughes'
ago,
ownership.
we thought the iPad was going to save us. I remember the first time that David Carr showed me his iPad, and I thought, well, this is how we're all going to read magazines and newspapers.
Right.
And that turned out not to be true.
So when, going away from that towards this more distributed world that you spoke of, certainly when you take down a paywall and you don't have a paywall as a significant revenue stream, it's much easier to distribute your content on these various platforms.
Right.
I think it will be hard for the New York Times, for example, to fully experiment with Facebook's instant articles and Google's AMP or whatever, because they will constantly be measuring the loss in direct advertising revenue that they would get on nytimes.com, and the trade-off may be incremental reach and subscriptions conversions.
Yeah, we've heard the CEO of the New York Times refer to that tension, that they want to explore, they want to experiment with Facebook and Google and others, but they're fearful of how much it's going to hurt the core business model.
I think you'll see more innovation with the likes of BuzzFeed or Mashable, where they don't have any of the either the cable constriction or the digital subscriptions that are coming from that.
So a creative services agency, is that what you said?
And so ultimately, I think...
Is that making ads for advertisers?
It's really doing sort of, it's making professional services or doing consulting for brands. So helping brands...
So let's make me a brand. What brand should I be?
Let's say that you're Vans.
Perfect. I bought these 5 days ago. I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, your Vans are really cool.
I've never had such cool shoes before.
Yeah, first thing I noticed when you walked in the room.
I'm even wearing them at totally inappropriate places, like the debate a couple days ago. Okay, so I'm Vans.
So Vans is trying, let's say, to
reach me,
to reach
more
you,
people,
right? More people like you.
Okay.
And so they might come to an agency that we have called Novel.
Okay.
And Novel was founded with the explicit purpose of trying to help brands like Vans develop campaigns or develop advertising campaigns that could run on the New Republic and off of the New Republic.
So they might write articles about how great Vans are for your website?
How cool people are who wear Vans.
Yeah, I'm trying to break this down.
Yeah, they're more likely to write a story about, and I think and this is really the service that the creative team at Novel performs, is Vans is saying, well, what should we write?
I would write an article about what it's like to walk around New York in order to sell me shoes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
And it
maybe this is what I should do for a living.
It becomes an audience first question, which is,
right.
Who do you want to buy the shoes, and what are they thinking about, and what's that conversation? How can we influence this? It is an editorial-like approach. Now, the reason it's called novel and the reason it's separate is it's very, very distinct from the editorial team. So
So you don't work on novel, just to be clear about that.
right. So they're working directly with the brands and they're coming up with that content strategy and that editorial
Cool.
vision for these campaigns. And it also reflects, the same problem that the publishers are having, that I think brands are probably having, is that, there was a time when you could put an ad in the New York Times and you could say, okay, everyone's going to see that Macy's ad on page 4. That doesn't have. They're having to go find their
that's
customers
going
too.
Down. Yeah.
And so these strategies, and I think it reflects the whole strategy of the New Republic, is to really adapt to those changes rather than try to defend an old way of doing
I do think the novel team should go ahead and pitch Vans now. We've come up with a good idea. With a good strategy here, a good concept. So let's talk about how else you make money briefly. That's one way to make money. How else?
Subscriptions, print subscriptions. We have a loyal subscriber base. Digital subscriptions is something. We certainly run display advertising on our website. Licensing fees, distributing it to universities through professional seat licenses. Events. Events are a big part of the media business, it seems, in 2015.
And then maybe from the Facebooks of the world someday? What's the idea? Just briefly for our audience about what, so when I put an article on Facebook and I print the whole article there, if I put the whole article on Snapchat, how do we profit? Just through ads, right? Just through.
It's just through ads.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think there was a very good article in the Times today saying that the monetization that publishers were receiving on Facebook's instant articles was much lower than it would be than they could make it on their own site.
Yeah, they're frustrated by that.
Right, because they can't do rich media, they can't do video, and all the stuff that advertisers are paying for, Facebook isn't allowing, which is enabling the articles to run faster. But it's strictly advertising on Facebook. I mean, I heard a fairly contrarian framework the other day, which was that another consultant was saying that that Facebook has a paywall, and that you have to pay as a publisher in order to be seen on Facebook, which I actually thought was a very nice sort of.
And let's just explain that. That means in order to really get to the top of your news feeds algorithmically, you've got to pay.
You've got to pay a little bit, and they will fiercely deny that.
Right.
But
it feels true.
But it feels true.
Feels true. And the reason why this matters to our crowd is, Gabriel, it matters because if I'm a journalist and I want to reach a lot of people, or if I'm a new employee of a news organization just at my first job out of college, we've got to be thinking about the business dynamics of how the world's changing.
Sure. And that's been, I mean, they tell you at these panels, don't bring up questions you don't know the answers to, but I'm going to bring up one that has definitely been vexing us, which has been Facebook. I mean, Facebook is, and I think this is industry-wide, is not delivering the same kind of traffic or the size of audience as it used to.
Which is very scary. It's like they have a spigot and they're just tightening it or loosening it at their whim.
It can feel like that. I don't think that's probably what's happening, but certainly when you see the traffic reports of how much traffic Facebook sent to us a year ago compared to it today. And so, this I think is, and it goes back to that question of versatility. We need to adapt to that. We need to figure out, all right, if sort of the curiosity gap and all these other headline games that people got very good at a couple years ago aren't working the same way. We are constantly having to come up with what are those new tactics to find out the audience that we're looking for.
So let's pivot or pivotize or whatever it is to politics, to the election. We are 52 weeks until Election Day, and the New Republic is a crucial part of understanding what's happening with the American electorate. You all come from a liberal perspective, is that fair to say?
Sure.
And we've got another Democratic debate coming up in a few days. What has stood out to you most, Gabriel, in terms of our election climate thus far? What does it mean to you that Donald Trump and Ben Carson are atop the polls and that Bernie Sanders is even ranking in the polls at all?
I think the biggest theme that is showing in this election for me is just how smaller the political, chattering class is getting. I think smaller in the sense that
theoretically everyone's now part of it.
Yeah, there was a there was a story a couple months ago, or a month or two ago, about a young supporter of one of the candidates. I can't remember, but there was an entire outrage cycle about whether or not he had lied about his resume. We were talking about a 13-year-old who was posting YouTube things. And it was this fully developed scandal involving a YouTube supporter of it. And I think that kind of happens over and over, where the volume is coming up, but the significance is coming down.
Is that our faults for writing too many stories about the 13-year-old?
No, I don't think it's our fault. I think it's a nature of our media world, where you can tune in. There's going to be a small group of people that are intensely interested in each little development on some of these news cycles, and so. For a place like the New Republic, we're not a giant news organization. We're not chasing every single breaking development in the cycle, and so our challenge is really to figure out, okay, how can we compete? First of all, how can we stand out? How can we be relevant? And so I think what we're doing, and this kind of reflects the entire editorial strategy, is we need to really stand by our agenda. We need to figure out what are the issues that we care about the most, and really kind of stick to them. And that's been kind of coming into focus this year, and I think we're going to see it more into focus. Right now,
what are those issues?
Well, right now, what we're really kind of focused not on 2016, but we're really focused on the Paris climate talks and what's going to happen there. Our latest issue is a special issue on climate, starting with a sort of a lead essay about what does success look like? What needs to happen in Paris to put us on a path to avoiding the worst of the impacts of climate change? And so we'll be covering that climate conference day by day, and really measuring it against what we set out as the terms of success. Our politics team, they're in the process of really defining the themes that they're going to be following, and these are really more about the issues that our writers care about.
Not hair?
Not hair. There's no one who's identified hair as a theme, but those are issues like income inequality. It's issues, I think, the Sanders, what's happening in the Democratic side is absolutely fascinating. You're seeing a big conversation going on between an establishment side of the Democratic Party who has had a Democrat in the White House, and people on the left who are saying, I'm not really happy with what's happened. I think that more can be achieved. And that dialogue, independent of who wins the nomination, is worth paying attention to, and it's going to be the kind of thing that influences our political dialogue, no matter who's in the White House for the next 5-10 years.
Speaking about influencing our political dialogue, do you find that Sanders stories get you more traffic than, say, Hillary stories? And if so, do you care? Is that something you pay attention to?
We notice. It's hard not to notice that Sanders.
Is
Sanders
he
has
actually a bigger draw?
I think so. I haven't run the keyword searches, but I anecdotally, yes. I think
there's something about the excitement and the passion of his base that you don't see with other candidates' bases. So that's why I ask.
Yeah, I mean his base reminds me of the Ron Paul supporters.
I'm sure they'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it also reminds me of the Howard Dean supporters.
There we go, Howard Dean.
In 2004, going a little bit further back.
Sure.
I think Sanders has touched this nerve that other candidates, Obama did this in 08, of getting sort of the most internet savvy, most internet active supporters out, and that can be a big. They can be very loud.
Right.
I remember after the first debate, it was hard not to run into the screenshots of polls on your site and other sites showing that
Jesus.
I think it was I don't even think they showed Hillary showing up to that debate.
This ticked me off so much. All these Sanders fans claiming that he won the debate. Just look at the online polls,
Right.
And then obviously when the real polls came out, Hillary seemed to be the winner of the debate. Although he did just fine. It wasn't like he had a terrible night. But the Sanders fans were citing these online polls that weren't actually scientific.
And I think
which is what Donald Trump does as well.
I think that's a part of this media age. You have
People cherry pick what they want to believe.
Well, you also have a small group of people. I mean, it's very easy to form this kind of hard view that obviously Sanders won the debate. Anyone who suggests otherwise is in the tank or lying or
Corporate
something.
media.
that's much easier to do when you're in a discussion group that only has other people that agree with you. And I see that happening over and over again on all sides of, on all parts of the political spectrum.
Do you view part of TNR's job as to puncture people's filter bubbles, to force them to read stuff that they might not agree with?
That could be part of it. We have a really clear mission. We are about novel solutions to the critical issues of our time. And this is the founding mission for the New Republic, going all the way back 100 years ago. It's something that, I think we kind of view as a rededication, and not something that we're inventing for the place. And what does that mean? I think, if you go back and read about the founders and what they were doing, the first words of the very first issue was, frankly, the New Republic is an experiment. And they had a very specific experiment in mind. And it's an experiment that has as much resonance today as it did then, which was, is it possible to reach a large audience with very smart, serious thinking? Or by being large, do you by definition dumb yourself down? That was the founding experiment. And I think that, what was going on in 1914, which was the birth of a national press with different magazines. The wire services had been going for a while, but you really had a national dialogue. We now have a dialogue that is so much bigger. I mean, it's one of the greatest things about the communication technology is that it is not walled off to just a few people who can participate. It really is a level of participation. But we can also sit here and talk about all of the downsides. There's the noise. There's the isolation, and I think that the New Republic's part of our part of that heritage is figuring out how to have insightful conversations about the real challenges of our time, using all of the advantages of the media environment that we have. And so, the climate issue is definitely in line with that, which is, I've read all of the doom and gloom about climate change. I am fully aware that, if we do not do something, that bad things are going to happen. But I think it's now incumbent upon us, the generation that is going to be living through this, to figure out, okay, how do we survive this? What do we need to do today? Do we need to be investing in infrastructure to keep New York City from flooding? What needs to happen on the diplomatic front? These are all very forward-thinking and solutions-oriented conversations that the New Republic was historically founded to have, and I think that's what we're about today.
Do you find fewer and fewer outlets or fewer and fewer reports actually covering those topics, policy topics? Is that an opportunity for outlets like yours?
I think so. And one of the I think finest moments in the New Republic's history is an issue like gay marriage, which started out as a pretty brief essay by Andrew Sullivan. It ran on the cover in 1989, and it was a totally radical idea. The problem it was addressing was well understood. It was that gay and lesbian men and women in America were not participating fully in public life. And Andrew advanced a solution. He said, let's make marriage equal. That will change everything about how gay and lesbians are seen in our culture. And people shouted him down from both the left and the right. There was an entire political campaign that was dedicated to exploiting the opposition to this idea. And now, 25 years later, it's the law of the land. And that kind of process has happened over and over in the New Republic. And I think that's sort of what our responsibility is trying to come up with center on these ideas and really focus on them and breathe life, not over a couple weeks, but over years and decades if necessary.
How are you seeing media coverage changing when it comes to the political sphere? What are we getting less of? What are we getting more of? What do you yell at the TV when you guys are watching political coverage?
I think the biggest change is that the media is really losing power. They're no longer the primary way that candidates and campaigns can reach their supporters. Ben Carson is a perfect example of this. I mean, whatever he says, and he seems to be doing very well by complaining about the media, he has a mechanism to reach supporters who give him money in ways, and it's not just Ben Carson. It's it's Bernie Sanders.
Let me push back. The Fox Business Debate on a channel no one knew existed had 13 3.5 million viewers.
Sure.
CNN's debate had 24 million. How can you say that we're losing power if more people than ever are staying up late and watching really boring debates between people they might hate on cable news?
Well, those events and those in live events are definitely where television comes in, but I think on a day-to-day basis, the social
going around
networks,
us more and more.
there are so many ways to get messages to the supporters and to not just get messages out, to take their names and to register them. Ted Cruz has an app with like a game of how many times you get points by sending out, articles to your friends and
cool.
and these are ways that from our perspective as members of the media, it's a little bit of competition.
It's really interesting to compete with. I think it was Ben Smith who recently said that every political campaign is really a media company, a media organization.
Absolutely.
I wish I had thought of it. It was a very basic but really important insight. And you're right, that does install the idea of competition.
Yeah.
So what do we do if they're all media companies, if Ted Cruz has an app? What do we do? What do we do to compete?
Well, I think what we're doing is we're really making sure that we define ourselves. We're not fundamentally just a medium that takes a message from one place and gets it out to another place. We really have to have a point of view. We have to have something that we're talking about, and we have to win our audience for what we're saying and the discussions that we're leading. Now, we want to, obviously they involve, any big issue involves a questioning of who's going to be in power in 2017. But I think it has to go through that prism of, what are we about and what do we think needs to happen?
Elliot, what do you think has been changing about media coverage of the election cycle? Or politics more broadly?
I mean, I think back to 2012 when, was it Mother Jones who caught Mitt Romney speaking at an off-the-record thing using video coverage from his phone. And I think that it enables a brand like Mother Jones or like the New Republic or a small one without 13 million or 25 million viewers to compete, right? And I think that's really exciting. I mean, mobile is certainly everybody has a phone in this room most likely, and that watching people's, I'm always obsessed with presidential candidates like splash screens and just those first 1 to 3 pages, and it's just like Jeb! Exclamation point, when then it's mobile phone, right? Submit, right? And
I have to give my email address before I can even open Ted Cruz's app.
Ted Cruz, right?
Smart.
And you're like,
or even better, sign in from Facebook, where you can have all of
where
my
you can
data.
get all that data.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
And you stopped right there,
I
right?
did. But I will sign up later.
And I find that really
all
interesting.
Of them, all 17 candidates.
And
A lot of newsletter.
so, I think just at a slightly higher level, I mean, I'm sort of curious just how screwed up the Republican Party is right now, and there's no leadership in that whatsoever. I'm actually sort of curious of what you think, Brian, at least of Donald Trump, and whether or not, like, you think he's self-aware, or and how
I do.
or
I think
and
it's
is
a fair
media
question.
savvy, right? Like,
When I look at Trump, I see someone who I think what we didn't realize in June about Trump. I didn't think he'd run, and then once he ran, I didn't think he'd file his papers. And ever since then, I've stopped making predictions about Donald Trump because I've been wrong. I think what I didn't realize and what most people didn't realize in June and July, as this race started, and everyone wondered if he was a flash in the pan and if he was going to be gone by November, was that he had 10 years of practice on the most important stage, which is television, which is The Apprentice. I think what President Obama's doing is really fascinating, going out and being the interviewer. Interviewing David Simon and Bill Nye, and who was the novelist he interviewed most recently?
Marilyn Robbins.
And flipping the table, flipping the script. That's a manifestation of all these trends that we're talking about, that he's doing that. Yep. And in some cases, he's doing it for other websites. He did it for the New York Review of Books most recently. Right. So he's creating content in that way. Yep. And of course, Trump's creating a ton of content as well in his own way. Yep. But you bring up mobile, and I think we should talk a little bit about mobile before we go out to the audience, because especially for our crowd, mostly of students, mobile, do you think about mobile as the way they can get ahead, the way they can start their careers? Do you think about the biggest advantage that students have is that they're more comfortable on their smartphones than maybe we are. They're more comfortable with Snapchat than I definitely am. Yeah. Is that a big advantage for the young people in the room?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that being sort of a digital native or a mobile native, where that is an advantage. I think, if people who are interested in developing products or services for the phone, it's really hard on mobile because you have to be super precise with the language, with the fields, with the data. What Ted Cruz is doing right there, it takes a lot of discipline to structure this huge world, and he wants to raise money. But the number one thing he wants you to do is to get your phone number, most likely, right?
Yeah.
So if you can do that, and you can be that clear in your thinking and the actions that you want people to take, I think it's a tremendous advantage, both for the utility of the products, and I think having mobile first experience, over the course of the last 7-8 years, or sort of post iPhone world, that will be tremendously valuable.
Yeah, yeah. Gabe, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through sort of a print to digital, print to desktop transition, and I feel like the desktop to mobile transition, it feels so similar. All of the habits that are relatively new, related to the web browser, are falling away. And I think if any of us, no matter the age right now, were to audit our media consumption, what's coming in through the phone is very high.
Shocking, actually, how high it might be compared to a few years ago.
Absolutely. And so I think...
I to underscore your point. Print to desktop was one change, but the desktop to mobile is as big a change.
Absolutely.
That's really important. It's not print to web.
No.
It's or analog to digital.
Yeah.
It's a third leap that we're making right now.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we've done is really, in all the discussions that I have with Elliot and his team, I think we try to make sure that we're thinking about the mobile experience first. And even if it means something that doesn't work as great on the desktop, that kind of importance and priority is vital. And I think that, especially for people who are just starting their career, new things, new platforms, change is nothing but opportunity for new ideas. The best way to kind of move ahead is to not try to do something that 10 people at a firm are already doing. It's doing that new thing that no one else is doing. And there's so much that hasn't really been settled on what journalism on mobile looks like. How do you find it? How do you bounce around through it? It's something that we think a lot about, but I know that there are ideas that are better that are probably in this room from people who are just coming up.
So mobile is definitely the first screen. So with that in mind, how do you square that with your all's love for long-form journalism? I thought about this because I wrote a 5,000-word piece a couple weeks ago, and it was like the thing I was most proud of at CNN. And then I look at the stats about how far people scrolled, and I got really depressed. And I swore never to look at it again.
Yeah.
And it made me think about how I get people to scroll on a smartphone. And have you all come up with any secrets to that?
Well, I look at it a couple ways. Our biggest story of the year was a 10,000-word piece that was read a lot on phones. So I think this idea...
So how did you get them to scroll?
They really liked the story. I mean, I think people like phones. People watch 2-hour movies on their phones.
True.
I mean, the people are sitting in front of their phones for a very long time. So I don't think that's really the challenge. The challenge is that experience. Does it feel? Is it difficult? Do I have to pinch and zoom? Do I have to scroll side to side to get the full experience, or is it formatted in a way that I'm getting everything? I mean, those are kind of the presentation. But more broadly, this short form versus long form is definitely an idea that we think about a lot. I'm really trying to push things away from the middle. I think in the digital era, there's a tendency for everything to start to become the same. I call it kind of the mushy middle's gravity.
Kind of like 800-word stories.
Yeah. I think if you look at blogs, how they started in early 2000s, they were very short. I mean, they were actually probably closer to tweets and Facebook posts than they are today. And I think as blogs, or basically publishing on the web, became a more popular thing, you saw those stories take on. People said, "Oh, well, I can do a daily news story in this format, or I can do a long form magazine piece on a blog."
Right.
And there was a tendency to sort of everything to kind of get together. I think we've done pretty well at trying to really be clear to our readers about what are we doing. This is, we have all these writers and editors, and they can do fast stuff, they can do long stuff, but I think it's really important to signal to the readers what they're getting. This is my instant reaction to a news event that just happened. And I think readers want to know that. But they also want to say, I spent 2 months researching this piece, and a team of people worked on it. And so I want to keep the distinction between those very, very bright.
So part of that is about the design of them, right? Making them look different. Part of that's about the marketing of them for the college students in the room. They've got to be marketers as well as journalists. They've got to be comfortable tooting their own horns.
Oh yeah,
definitely. So
I mean, it's amazing though, in just looking at the CNN article page, how much stuff there is on it, right? No, it's not designed for the 5,000 word article.
That's
it's
true.
designed
That's true.
for the 500 word article.
Well, my takeaway actually was we have to design the next 5,000 word story I write differently.
Very differently,
design.
right?
gotta
If you
design
look at
differently.
this, it's trying to promote everything there is on CNN,
Right.
To other text articles, to TV, to
Yeah.
slideshows. And that's where the discipline to design for mobile comes in.
It's a great word, discipline.
You
yeah.
know, making choices is so hard in anything, right?
Yeah.
But really, in web design and product development, it's sort of critical.
Well, it's the same version of writing a short story is harder than writing a long story.
right.
Writing a tweet is harder than writing a Facebook post. Well, thank you both. Thank you both, and thank you all for being here. All right.
Revenue's good. Yeah.